PodSaaS, where we're putting the SaaS back in sassy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of PodSaaS. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we have Brian Robertson from VisiQuate. How's it going, Brian?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Where are you coming to us from?
What's that?
Where are you coming to us from? Where are you based out of?
Northern California. So
Okay.
Santa Rosa, California, wine country.
Nice.
Yeah, north of the city.
Beautiful area.
It is
Awesome.
a nice day.
Nice. Awesome. Before we kind of go into the rapid fire questions where we can get to know you a little bit better, tell us a little bit more about, what the elevator pitch is or, what VisiQuate does. And then also let us know what makes a good customer for you guys.
Yeah, sure. So we're in the healthcare industry. We have software that we sell to providers of healthcare, so large, typically hospital systems, but other providers like, even life flight helicopters or specialists in things like GI, spinal cord, anything like that, behavioral health. So, but the industry of providers delivering care, we're on the business side of that. So we have deep analytics, insights, algorithms, AI, machine learning, all the buzzwords of today. We operate that in a cloud model, all to provide insights to make the business side of healthcare thrive more. It could be contribution margin, service line, receivables, getting better at, cost accounting. So we're trying to help the CFO, COO, CIO inside of a provider almost have like their own Bloomberg terminal and almost day trade on things that make them more efficient, more effective, grow their top line, and improve labor productivity. It's really the health of the daily operations that we manage and monitor and provide a combination of software and consulting.
Interesting. Okay. So it gives them like a super high level and also seems like a super granular level if they wanted to get into more micro view of what the day-to-day operations look like to allow them to streamline and operate more efficiently. Yeah.
Yeah, they can go from high-level insights, to your point, to very fine-grained, very specific transactions and kind of navigate that data in a cloud-based, very intuitive, think and solve at the speed of your clicks is how I talk about it.
Got it. Very cool. Yeah, that's super interesting product. In the medical space, it's challenges typically you're going against like legacy systems, right? And the idea of like tech learning curve, I think is also important, and adaptability and those kinds of things. Like those are usually like the biggest hurdles, I think, from like a lot of like healthcare tech kind of companies that are selling into providers. So I'm curious as to kind of like some of those things of maybe you guys have dealt with and how you guys overcame them. But before we do that and talk more about, VisiQuate, I would love to just to get to know your journey a little bit more. And we do this in the series of just like rapid fire questions. Nothing too crazy, but if you're up for it, we can get things started.
Sure.
Awesome. Let's do it. First question, super simple. Favorite entrepreneur and or startup story? It can be separate or the same.
Oh boy, it's going to sound trite, but there's so many, but I'm a fan, probably where I live, of jobs in the garage and the passion I share a passion to make the software very human. So he always talked about the humanity side of it, bringing art to the UI. So our solutions are very much thinking about client experience, user interface design, giving the user a very elegant, contemporary, another way to say it is business software shouldn't suck.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, a lot of it does. So I'm inspired and have been inspired by the Apple story, because I just think that they get it right at bringing, the art and the science to create value.
Awesome. That's a good answer. Jobs is a good one. I think we just typically like to narrow in on the specific facet of that individual's personality. And I think you pretty much hit it on the head. So another question is, do you remember what you wanted to be as a kid? We're talking about 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah. Well, I guess or 9, 10 years old, I was told by my mom that I should be a orthopedic surgeon.
Okay.
Because she was a nurse and worked in a hospital, and her perspective was they do really interesting work, and it's complex, and so I would tell people at 10 years old, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon. I don't think I knew what it was. If you fast forward the tape through college, I was going to be Wall Street. I got my undergrad in corporate finance.
Okay.
So I was going to, just do the finance thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up through a variety of things in the healthcare industry on the finance side. Thought it would be a stepping stone, and then it kind of turned into a career.
Interesting.
So I like to say, helping CFOs chase cash through deep analytics and insights, and for 30 years.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's a noble effort and valuable expertise to have, I'm sure. Next question is centered on most painful experience, and this could be personal or professional. And the context behind it is that I think the most exponential growth we typically see, again, that can be personal or professional, I think typically stems from a place of extreme discomfort. So has there been any period of time or any specific event that you can remember or recall where obviously sucked going through it, but you can see as like a character defining moment?
Yeah. The second company, actually, Lorena, who was with us, was with me at that company as well. We had a period of hyper growth. Let's just say that we hit the stride around market timing, a solution that resonated. We had a very, very a channel partner that just crushed it. We were selling directly to hospitals of a certain threshold. They were selling, and it all just kind of landed in one quarter, where the tidal wave came in, and you have a bunch of, type A personalities that really want to back up what they sell. And it was like, oh gosh, what did we create? So that time period where it was stressful, there's only 24 hours in a day. So how do you get 100 people, delivering 3 times what they thought was going to happen? The pain, since you described pain, was sleep deprivation, stress, fear of failure. The client's going to boot us out because we can't keep up. That period of time, a lot of Saturday and Sunday workshops and alignment on we can't fail. Failure's not an option. I think we all watched Apollo 13, got regrounded in that line. But it was a high stress, high anxiety time period, mainly just because there was so much conviction to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of lessons learned, and yet at the same time that turned into clients, really believing in us because we found a way to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
We brought a lot of complexity together in a short period of time. But it was definitely painful.
Fair enough. Which leads me to my next question. But, in those moments when you're pulling those late night Saturdays, Sundays, what's motivating you in these 25th hour? Like, what's keeping you pushing forward? Obviously, you're in a situation where it's a good problem to have. But outside of that, you mentioned conviction to deliver. Is that it? Or is there anything more personal that's driving you behind all of that?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of the individual. If you have a lot of individual contributors that have the same core values and principles, but then it's how you align. So for us, it became, I think, everybody doing their part for their individual set of jobs to be done or discrete deliverables per person. It's kind of like you didn't want to let your team member down.
Mm.
So if I had to do a task that was dependent, on the next person doing their task, like didn't want to let the client down, didn't want to let them down. And so when everybody's, burning the midnight oil at the same time, and that was not in the days where we had Slack and things where you could, it was phone calls and, corners of the garage that you didn't wake up your family, I suppose. But I guess the esprit de corps of when you're all in it together, it would just give you energy and adrenaline that you may not otherwise have if you weren't, trying to win the fight together.
Yeah. I mean, I think, starting a business and the people that you surround yourself with are the ones that's in the trenches with you. It is like going to war, whether, you think of it that way or not, it is going to be that way at some point or another. Do you have a favorite story from those times? Like, even in these most stressful moments, I remember kind of like through other companies that I've gone through, right? Like, finding those, sometimes those are the fondest memories. It's like, we got really super creative in some of those really like high stress environments. Has there been anything like that you can remember that you're like, oh, that was fun, even though it was painful?
One that stands out is a very critical deliverable for a client that was going live with some reserve reporting for the CFO that was connected to an audit. So we were part of like treasury and cash management, the CFO and his team, and a group of outside auditors, big four. And it was a switch from one methodology of projecting receivable reserves to another. And from the corporate CFO down, there was a lot of eyeballs on us. And this was between us and the client. It wasn't just, the vendor's doing the work. We were a collaborative team. And literally at 4:30 in the morning, negotiating what would be an acceptable threshold to go live. Like the balancing was off by less than 1%. And we got sign off from the CFO and our sponsor that was okay, that we could, and like literally came together by 7 a.m. Then had to give the demo 2 hours later to the CFO and the auditors on no sleep, and in a demo that 3 people handed the baton. And, it was, I'd have to say, I'd give us credit for like mic dropping the moment together as a team and got, this was tied to a statement of work that if we proved it, we could convert it to a 5-year agreement or something like that. So the classic go, no, nail biting decision, similar to that muscle that we were building together as a team, I suppose. So that's just one that stood out, like, holy hell, great job, everybody, kind of thing.
Got it. And I assume you guys ended up winning that 5-year agreement or whatever
and building a lot of trust and credibility we had some trust and credibility with certain people, but we built a lot of trust and credibility with others.
Yeah, that's awesome. In those moments, or kind of like since then, right? Like still, I'm sure that was like the previous company, and then now with VisiQuate and the early stages, I'm sure, of like VisiQuate to getting to where you are now. Sure, there's a lot of like learned lessons that help you expedite certain things, but at the same time, it's still stressful. So is there anything that you do that you now manage better, I think, like to decompress personally? Any go-to exercises or things that you do to kind of find that balance?
For me, there's some things in the background. You might see the next.
I see that. Yeah. And some wine glasses.
yeah, exactly. Wine and guitar. I mean,
there you go.
It's those wine glasses were a gift from the staff for our 10-year anniversary. But
awesome.
And we live in wine country, so
yeah.
Now that is my escape. So I would say like there are times where I want to play something like Ozzy or Black Sabbath to release a little bit. And then there's probably times where, some meditative smooth jazz is the right elixir for the moment.
I love it. I think music, and I do think, like, personally, there's a lot of things with the creative arts does tie to entrepreneurship, and the way that I think it facilitates similar portions of the brain where, you're problem solving, or whether you're problem solving, for critical part of the product, or you're trying to find the next note to align with the melody. It's all somewhat similar in terms of like what you're trying to seek and fit.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's back to the comment about jobs, right? The art and science blending left brain, right brain. I'm somebody that probably geeks out on left brain, right brain, and tries to find balance, and even in business,
Yep.
We can analyze something in a very nerdy data science way, but you can also put a tuxedo on it, is the term that we use, so that it's consumable to a wider audience that may not want to see it, presented like a Wall Street diagram.
Absolutely. I agree. 1,000%. Cool. Next question here is, as a founder, right, you typically will wear a lot of different hats. Has there been a skill that you picked up along the way that you've loved or hated, or had just some strong emotional disposition towards?
Okay. So just to clarify, something that I hate or learned.
Something that you've loved or hated. Like it could be like something that you never expected that you would love. I mean, a lot of the times we see like bookkeeping as one of those things that they just hate, or like the legal part of things is something that maybe they ended up like learning a lot and finding a lot of enjoyment from that part of it. It just, it's not necessarily the things that we imagine going in when we start a business is going to be something that we'll do, but we have to pick it up early on in the early days.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm in this mode right now in our company because we're going through, our own various inflection points. I suppose that I learned over time that I'm a pretty good periscoper. So this is talked about in various business books, but like, I can hang out in the boardroom or the C-suite, but I can also get down literally in the atomic level with the staff and say like, no, I want to understand how we're doing, data integration for the client, like all the gory detail. Because it helps me think about many things in the business or the product, so I like going from the, truly sea level to like, 20,000 leagues, and traversing a little bit, because our whole style as a company is even our own C-suite. It's not an ivory tower. We're all workers. We're all we're all grab a shovel kind of folks, and really only hire, people that, will grab any shovel. So I find I do some of my best work to unlock value when I'm periscoping, and not, too much with the mucky bucks.
No, I appreciate that. Next question here is a little bit more personal, but number one, do you have a bucket list? And then two, what is one of the more ambitious items on that bucket list?
Oh, wow. That's very timely. I have some ambitious things on the bucket list. I also have some just nerdy guitar things. So one of our colleagues helped me. There's a guitar player named Joe Bonamassa that I always wanted to see play at Red Rocks.
Okay.
One of our colleagues happens to live there, and he went ahead and bought the tickets anyway, knowing I'd probably say yes. And so I got the call one day, like, I got you on a bucket list item. So I just did that. It was amazing.
Awesome.
One of the more ambitious ones is I do want to do, and I say this with a disclaimer that there's a lot of debate on the 8 wonders of the world. Is it 7? Is it 8? Is it, and some of them are changing. I've done some of them, and there's still some that I haven't. So doing that with family and friends, I love trips that involve family and friends. That's probably the most aspirational one. And mainly just because you have so much calendar coordination.
True.
Getting all those folks to align. But yeah, that's one that stands out.
Got it. That's amazing. Last question here before we kind of jump into more of the VisiQuate story, but it's the idea of legacy, or maybe better stated is like, what kind of impact do you want to leave on this earth before you leave it?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm very passionate about what we do, but we also are kind of geeks at the Simon Sinek, golden circle. So why is the most important, how we're different and unique, and then what we do is important, but why we do it. So we have a lot of alignment in the company from the very top, that we are trying to provide economic value. We're trying to monetize data, dollarize data operationally so that those funds can go more to the clinical side in patient care. So, for example, like in our industry, just in where we operate, there's over $200 billion of waste in all of the functions that are in sort of back office. And analytics and AI and machine learning can do a lot to unlock that waste. So when we collaborate every day with clients and solve a $10 million problem or a $20 million problem using data, what gets us excited is that either paid for a new CAT scanner or MRI machine, or it paid for, 100,000 IV infusion pumps. It's anything that's dollars should be shifted to care. So that's the real reason we're doing it. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, the mark we all want to leave is that we did something meaningful and transformative using the power of data. Data's the new oil, or some are saying data's the new bacon. We fully subscribe to that, but it's data for good. It's data for the right reason. Mm-hmm. So that's what motivates not only myself, but our entire team. It's sort of return on data. How are we creating tangible value that can shift those dollars over to what matters?
Got it. Awesome. Cool. On that note, we're done with the rapid fire questions, but a lot of good nuggets in there that I want to extrapolate on. So, you had mentioned that you majored in finance ultimately, and you're going to go down the finance route. You ended up in healthcare. Walk us through the kind of like the early part of your career of, how did you end up in healthcare? And then how did that, ultimately, how'd you make the decision to stick around it as opposed to how you said it before, which is, you imagine it was going to be a stepping stone?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I actually did some medical coding in college.
Okay.
The quick version is a friend's dad was a doctor and said, I'm going to teach you this thing called, at the time, ICD-9 coding, and now it's called something that it's called ICD-10. I started to learn about claims and coding, and it was just college money. That experience led to actually a family member said, I know somebody in that space and they do that, and maybe that could be a good stepping stone for you, like first job out of college. And that's really where the slippery slope started. I sometimes feel like Pacino in Godfather 3, like I can't get out, I literally got involved then in all things sort of receivables and billing and reserves and how, the business, how do you monetize the business side of healthcare? And then that led to being a consultant, and I hung my own shingle, and, we'd sit on the edge, we'd sit on the opposite end of the CFO's desk, helping him do 1,000 things so that he can increase cash flow.
Yeah.
So we became cash flow specialists and receivables. The average hospital, their receivables on the balance sheet exceed property, plant, and equipment. Sometimes property, plant, and equipment, but it's either the number one or the number two biggest asset, and in some cases, billions and billions of dollars. So getting paid from all the payers it goes on and on, the complexity of that. So it just kind of started there, and by doing that work, you're doing process reengineering, you are doing discounted cash flow analysis. So some of it is like, the payback method, and all of those things that you learn in corporate finance, you can apply inside of a hospital in many regards.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, well, okay. I just kept doing that. And then it led to, I'll create a business application for that. And then here we are 3 companies later, and data and analytics and consulting is all, it's all in one. So I like to say I day trade on trying to help clients find value every day instead of, our Bloomberg terminal is something we created for the benefit of the hospital instead of just running a fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of how it happened. It happened, and then I found myself just having fun, and next thing I know, I had a career and was a founder. This is the third shingle, and still having fun.
Yeah, awesome. What would you say is the most fun about it?
Oh, the most fun, just new problems every day. Like data in our industry is it's chaos, but it's finding the organized chaos. It's helping clients unlock value, and it could be, sometimes we get as excited about a discovery of something that's 200,000 in value, and sometimes it's 200 million in value, depending on the size of the client. And so when you're using the power data to make that discovery, and then when you fix it, not just once, but you fix it, we always say in our field, like go upstream and fix it at the root cause. Sometimes that's hard though. Sometimes fixing that is changing physician behavior on the impact that they have on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fighting the good fight every day to unlock value, and just I think the uncertainty of that, we tend to attract people that like to tackle most problems.
Yeah. This being, you saying the third shingle, what were I think you walked us through the previous one, but is that first shingle then the consulting business? And
yeah, first shingle was consulting, doing every job inside of a hospital. My joke is I've done every job inside of a hospital revenue cycle 3 times, mm-hmm. including sitting there at 3 a.m. and keying charges back in the days where you keyed in charges, the coding and the follow-up and building a reserves model for a CFO, building a cost accounting engine or model. We did all of those things as consultants and learned that the data and the insights was always where the value was. So the insights would win over like doing process mapping, mm-hmm. right? And so that led to the second company, which it was also in the early days, 2001 to 2008. At the time, we called it an ASP. It wasn't a SaaS business. Software as a service and cloud hadn't been really mm-hmm. coined as phrases. So it was like, you can use the internet to deliver software instead of shipping CDs to everybody, yeah. right? So that's where we sort of codified that and could deliver it at scale. Mm-hmm. And hundreds of hospitals later, that was that story earlier about how we went through a hyper phase of growth. And then when the term big data, I decided I wanted to tackle even data for more of a broad platform instead of discrete solutions, because we had in the prior company more discrete solutions. I wanted it to be more of a platform. So the notion of data as a service or infrastructure as a service, analytics as a service, half of what we do is that, and half of what we do is people do buy a discrete point solution.
Got it. Okay.
So the journey's evolved according to how the market has evolved in many regards.
Yeah. Do you remember at what point you realized that, because your background, right, like it comes from more of like that finance side of things, but and I went through that too, but there's a moment for me, I remember personally, where I was like, oh, whatever mundane process that you're going through, you can actually build a solution that can automate that. And then an epiphany hits where a light bulb switches on and you're like, oh, well, if I even expand that further, like any idea almost, if I can build out process, I can build a product. Do you remember if you had that epiphany? If so, when? Because I think that's a key to unlocking, I think, that entrepreneurial journey, because I think not a lot of people are keen or aware of the fact that, hey, if you know how to code, or if you know people who know how to code, you can build almost anything. Do you remember when that moment was for you?
Yeah, it was in the early 2000s where we discovered that there's certain data sets in healthcare that when they are independent of each other, you can do all kinds of analytics on them independent and still drive value. But when you do bring them together, and we talk about in the industry as longitudinal analysis. So when you thread the needle, like if a patient's name is Jane Q. Public, and Jane Q. Public lives in all of these operating silos, and if you thread the needle across that and you start to look at that, today hospitals very much want to deliver the most value for their patients. They want to keep them in network. They don't want it to be episodic. Oh, your knee hurts, come in and I'll fix your knee. Oh, you cut your finger slicing lemons, I'll fix your finger in the ER. Oh, you have to have your gallbladder taken out. Those are all episodic events. So you're not building a relationship with Jane Q. Public if you're looking at things in a siloed or episodic way. So we discovered just even a long time ago, you can intelligently join that data, and you can build a data model where you're the great silo buster. And I think when we cracked the initial code on that, it's one of the things that led to a lot of the value creation. And then today it's even exponential. The industry has only gotten more complicated and more fragmented due to a variety of reasons, but all of that data chaos gets turned into organized chaos, and then solve problems one at a time and leverage things like the Pareto principle. I mean, we find insights for clients that it's like, where do you want to start? Because there's 100 insights. Well, you still have to Pareto things and say, like, let's focus on the 20 things that are going to move 80% of the needle. And that stuff happens exponentially only when you bring all the data together instead of just, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, before you started VisiQuate, you had a successful second startup. What was the outcome from that? And then how did you make the decision to want to go into a third shingle? Obviously, it's not an easy feat to even do one. But yeah, what motivated you to kind of like push forward into a third?
Yeah, I just had a different vision than the group of folks that I built the second company with.
Okay.
And we took, we had a group of co-founders. Me and one other gentleman were the core. Others were there by virtue of shareholder status and early money. And then when we raised money and had outside capital come in and the classic go big, my vision of what I thought what I was seeing in the market, because I'm hands-on and I'm on all the same airplanes that many of our staff are. My read of the market was just different. And so we had to come to an amicable split because we had irreconcilable differences on, what the go-to-market strategy should be.
I see.
And then I think you reach a point as a core entrepreneur. I would say this to your audience, like when that burning desire and that inner conviction that you have and you're ready, you just got to go for it. I wanted to run my own show. So I frankly didn't have to, I didn't want to have to do a bunch of internal selling. It's like,
I get you.
I trust my instincts and vision, and so I'm going to go for it. So it's control. In many cases, that word can get misconstrued, but
Sure.
sometimes you need to have it so that you can be in charge of your destiny.
Absolutely. For sure. And how long ago was that? So VisiQuate, I believe, is almost a decade old.
Oh, we just had our 13th anniversary. So
Wow. Okay. Gotcha.
it was, that was around, forget the month, in 2008,
Okay.
that, and then in 2009, I actually did consulting with the company and stayed a shareholder for a long time. And, and hey, we saw each other on the court once in a while. So it was a fun dynamic, but, I would say, that 2009, something like
Okay.
that.
And how many employees you guys have now?
So we have almost exactly 100 U.S. staff, and then we run offshore. So we have a global footprint for, and I like to say, I mean, I'm wearing today a shirt called the Vishivanka that is in support of Ukraine flag. So that's one of our development centers. We've been there for 20 years, actually, across both those companies.
Wow.
We run the offshore model to find talent. Just as much, is there a cost efficiency that we hand down to clients? Yes, there is. But it's not, many times people think of offshoring as just a cost arbitrage. In our case, it's talent, access to talent, and then the follow the sun, being able to have people, it's 7 a.m. in every zip code. So VisiQuate's always working.
Yeah.
And so we're really passionate about how the assembly line is just, it never stops.
Yeah.
Because a hospital still runs, even though some of the stuff we do, a hospital runs, 24/7 and 365.
Yep. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. Very similar mindset when it comes to building out our own stuff too. So, cool. Last question here as we round up on the hour, and it's really more, again, similar to kind of how we rounded out on the personal side of things on the rapid fire, but this is more around the company, right? So, where do you imagine VisiQuate to be in the next 5 years? Is this, something where this is it for you in terms of like, not starting another business and another chapter, but this is like the long play. And if so, are you in the 5 years from now, are you focused on just kind of continuing to build and reaching that potential? Do you foresee some kind of like exit, or do you foresee going public at some point? What's kind of like the bigger company-wide vision that you see in the next 5, 6, 7 years?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I actually love this question, and I do get asked it, as you can imagine, often from different constituents. I'm definitely in the long-term game theory thinker mode. So I never really think about an exit, like a type of exit, IPO or anything like that. It's kind of the brutally honest answer is like, when the job is done, and our definition of the job being done means that we need to have made a meaningful contribution to the 200, it's actually, the number is like $275 billion of waste in the space. So in our view, until we have tackled that number in a meaningful way, like $50 billion of waste, right? Others are attacking that, but we like our strategy in making an impact on that number. So it's until we get to something like highly transformative, where we can sit back and say, wow, look at what we all did with our clients. Power of data in a way that you can't lie to yourself. You either did it or you didn't. As an analytics company, that's what you got to do, right? You got to have a big hairy goal and then measure it. And so, and the industry is known for being slow, and, they're a bit behind in technology. And so you got to be a long-term thinker. sometimes I answer that question depending on who's asking. Like, well, we're going to do the opposite of flipping houses. So if you want to invest in our company, don't invest if you're a day trader, right? We won't even let you have a seat at the table. Like we're only aligned with people that are aligned with the long-term vision.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just believe that all of the benefit that comes to shareholders and staff, it comes if you stay focused on what you're supposed to. All the textbooks tell you where you should focus and you should be principled. And some people do that like a bumper sticker. In our case, it's like, we're going to stay focused on creating the value, and you hit the numbers or you didn't on behalf of your clients. So it could, I don't think 5 years is a good way to talk about it. We're going to do all we can to push people up the analytics maturity curve where we end up in that number, but we're not going to rest until we all kind of sit around and go, yeah.
Fair enough. Great answer. I love ending it on that. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for spending the time with us and then just sharing again your story. I think it's helpful to hear, especially as we mentioned before we hopped on, is that hopefully somebody else might be listening to this story and it resonates with them, and inspired or motivated to go from the sidelines to having a skin in the game. And I think that's super important. If we can encourage more entrepreneurs and more innovators out there, that's a goal that's well worth it. So thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for having me, because I appreciate these kinds of conversations just as much as when, sometimes we're having to be a little bit more specific inside of our industry and podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed this and hope it was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.